Hi! Before going any further with this video, I want you to know that there will be imagery of self-harm and suicide in some of the footage. Nothing too graphic, but if those are subjects you'd like to avoid watching, then now's the best time to jump out of the video. Thanks for showing interest in my content, and have a great Halloween.
Don't talk to me. I'm not supposed to talk to the living.
It's been a while since I covered a survival horror game. I got into survival horror late in my youth because I couldn't understand tank controls or how combat worked with fixed camera angles. I overcame my biases against the genre by playing Onimusha in Fatal Frame. Onimusha helped me learn how to move through static camera angles with tank controls, and Fatal Frame demystified survival horror combat for me. This is why it's good to have a genre full of various titles. If the bigger titles in the genre put you off, you can still dip your toes by playing lesser known series. Fatal Frame is a pretty simple concept. I can explain it with this Simpsons clip.
What a story! You've stolen my soul!
Every Fatal Frame features a special camera designed to capture the essence of a ghost and contain it on film. Maiden of Black Water is no different, but the changes it brings to the core concept of the series make the experience feel fresh. Fatal Frame, Maiden of Black Water, is a 2015 survival horror game developed by Koei Tecmo for the Wii U. It got a PC port in 2021 with remastered textures and some risque content excised. That's the version I played. Historically, the Fatal Frame series followed most survival horror game conventions, fixed camera angles, and tank controls. The fourth game in the series, Mask of the Lunar Eclipse, changed it up by shifting the camera to an over-the-shoulder perspective like Resident Evil 4, as well as adding immersive elements to exploration, by cutting to camera angles behind the player character's head while opening doors, or closely following the player character's hand as they reach out to pick an item. Occasionally, a ghost hand will grab yours as you reach out to pick an item. You have to shake off the ghost hand to stop taking damage. You can avoid getting grabbed by the ghoulies by letting go of the action button before the ghost hand reaches yours. Maiden of Black Water carries these changes over, but with better presentation. As its title would suggest, Maiden has an overarching theme of associating water with life and death. To reinforce this theme, being dry or wet becomes a key factor in gameplay. When you come into contact with water, a meter will fill up in the bottom right corner of your screen, shown as a blue flower. The wetter you get, the more the flower blooms, which increases your chances of encountering ghosts as well as ghost hands. To dry off, you need to use embers. But keep in mind that if you're spending time running around in open areas while it's raining, you're going to get wet anyways. Save the embers for when you get indoors. If you lose your way, hold down right trigger to sense the trace of the path you're following. You need some kind of totem to get the trace, which is usually a photograph. When the ghosts come out, so does the camera obscura. Press left trigger to whip out the camera. Line up the ghost in your viewfinder, and press right trigger to take a shot. You can rotate the viewfinder's frame with X and Y. This helps to maximize the number of targets you can capture in a single shot. The camera uses film, and which type you equip affects your damage output as well as your reload speed. Lower quality film like Type 7 and Type 14 deal piddly damage but load faster. Type 60 deals consistently good damage but is a slowest loading film. Type 90 and Type 0 film hit hard and load fast but are extremely rare finds. When you shoot a ghost, you'll create spirit fragments that follow the target. If you don't shoot them fast enough, the fragments will return to the ghost and recover its health. The more times you shoot a target, the more fragments appear, and they all count as targets for the camera. If you can get 5 targets in a single frame, you can get a shutter chance. The viewfinder flashes red, and you'll deal extra damage to all the targets in the frame. When a ghost attacks, the viewfinder will flash red and a woodblock instrument will play. If you take a shot during this state, you'll trigger a fatal frame. You'll deal extra damage, and you can keep snapping pics of the ghost without spending any film while the viewfinder is red. Although there are 3 protagonists in the game, there are only 2 cameras obscura featured in the game. The The camera used for most of the game is able to take attachments that allow for special shots if you acquire enough spirit points from ghosts. Press right bumper to take a special shot. You can toggle the active attachment with the D-pad. The other camera can't take attachments, but it can take multiple shots with a single button press. It's great for taking fatal frame shots as you don't have to rapidly pull the right trigger. If a ghost manages to grab you, the camera automatically switches to the viewfinder and you have the opportunity to catch fatal frames to free yourself. You get points for landing powerful shots on ghosts, as well as finding opportunities to snap pics of ghosts wandering around the map. You can spend these points to purchase items at the start of every chapter, to upgrade your camera, and to buy outfits and accessories for your characters. The tension that exists during combat is trying to land the perfect shot while managing your film stock. Theoretically, you can never spend a single piece of film by having Type 7 equipped all the time, as you have infinite stock of it, but it barely deals any damage, and even taking advantage of fatal frames with Type 7 film can still take a while. Type 7 film should be reserved for when you need to use a camera obscura to solve puzzles. Sometimes doors will be locked, and you have to take a picture of it to get a clue as to where to find the key. The game becomes a scavenger hunt, and you need to find the exact spot and camera angle as you see it on the picture. When you defeat a ghost, you have the chance to reach out and glance at their spirit. This allows you to see their cause of death. It also nets you a decent amount of points. The thing about these glances is that you'll only ever see one for each enemy type. By the end of the game, you get familiar with every type of ghost, and realize that they aren't individual people, but just enemy classes in a video game. It takes some of the bite away from the horror. Combine this with the wetness mechanic, and eventually the game feels less like survival horror, and more like a JRPG with random encounters. Not bad, but there's a saying I've heard, and it goes like, familiarity breeds contempt. The more often you run into ghosts, the less scary they become, and the more they start to feel like obstacles in front of progress. I wasn't scared while I played the game, except for one specific jump scare, and that's because something ran in front of the camera and cut off the shot. I think having the ability to fight the ghosts took away their ability to scare me. That said, the game's full of great horror imagery. It likes to use VHS filters whenever it plays a flashback, and there's a persistent film grain effect on all the cutscenes to give the game a gritty horror film vibe. The devs worked really hard into sharpening up the textures, but you can still tell that the cutscenes were rendered at a lower aspect ratio. The game's structure is very interesting. Instead of focusing on a single protagonist, Maiden of Blackwater features 3 leads. The game is broken up into 14 chapters, and the chapter select screen explains the current objective and which character you'll play in the selected chapter. You can also switch the game's difficulty for each mission. It's very reminiscent of Devil May Cry 5, of all things. While we're on the subject of character action games, Maiden of Blackwater shares a lot of aesthetics with another Tecmo title, Ninja Gaiden. I know, you're probably saying, how? Well, when you start a chapter, the game features a title card that provides a brief summary of events, not unlike Ninja Gaiden. Also, the art style for the characters feels like it's from 3 console generations ago, like Ninja Gaiden. I can't really explain it, but they've got this smooth texture to their skin that other Japanese games with realistic textures like Yakuza don't have nowadays. It feels very anachronistic. Surprisingly, Maiden of Blackwater has another connection to Ninja Gaiden, but I'll get back to that after I finish talking about the main campaign. I don't want to go in depth with the plot, but the game explores themes of loneliness, companionship, and the role of women in marriage ceremonies. The local culture has a practice of placing women in boxes in order to preserve the natural order of things. It doesn't take a lit major to figure out that this game is a metaphor for loot boxes and gacha drops. I have criticisms about Maiden of Blackwater, but nothing that kept me from finishing the game. The game has 8 endings, but they're distributed among the leads. Each protag has a good and bad ending, depending on what you do in the final chapter. One of the leads has an option to choose his waifu, and each waifu has her own respective good and bad ending. In my initial run, I got 2 good endings and 1 bad ending, and while that sounds reductive to describe my experience, I actually didn't mind what I got. It felt bittersweet, but in a good way. Also, getting the good or bad ending from one of the characters depends on which phase you beat a boss, so I just wrote it off because the requirements were arbitrary. The game has a handful of locales that you'll revisit as the campaign progresses. On one hand, returning to the same area allows you to become familiar with the environments, which should make it easier to navigate in later chapters. On the other hand, you can get bored easily enough with going through the same forest or temple for the 8th time. Some of the things that took me out of the game are things that don't even concern the game itself. The rural area that serves as the game's backdrop is a mountain forest that's got a history of suicides. Whenever I go to the forest and run into a ghost, I cannot expel the thought of running into Logan Paul in this game. Also, 2 of the chapters take place in a home where you need to protect the inhabitants from ghosts. To keep an eye on everyone, you have to look at the video surveillance system and go to the rooms that experience electronic interference. What I'm trying to say is that, for 2 chapters, the game turns into 5 Nights at Freddy's. You can unlock outfits for your characters to get some more out of the game. Because I pre-ordered it, I had Rise's outfit from the Atelier games. Putting it on tends to kill the mood, as I kept thinking I was wearing Corone's jacket, and it lets it clip through your arms. When you beat the game, a second campaign is unlocked. Remember when I compared Maiden of Blackwater to Ninja Gaiden? Okay, so now how about you play the game as Ayane? This is such a weird bonus campaign. Because Ayane can't use conventional ninja weapons to fight the ghosts, she decides to borrow Trish's outfit from the Devil May Cry games and gets a tattoo that masks her presence from ghosts. You don't take pictures, but instead, you stun ghosts with your magic flashlight and then run past them to get to the end of the chapter. How is Ayane connected to the events of Maiden of Blackwater? She's trying to rescue a character that shows up in one of the various documents you pick up in the game. That's it. These 2 game series share another connection to each other. They're both pretty horny. Not surprising, considering Tecmo made the Dead or Alive Extreme games, but you do tend to notice how all the girls have a separate texture to their clothes to give them a wet t-shirt look when they're drenched. And Ayane gets a lot of cheesecake shots in her campaign. If you're one of those types who can't handle having horny content in their games, this might affect your overall experience. But if you're an adult who can handle it when the devs show their ass occasionally, then you should be fine. If you're looking for some scares, play Fatal Frame, Maiden of Blackwater. A picture may be worth 1,000 words, but this game goes for $40 on Steam.